Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. Monday bled into afternoon when the phone shrilled. A voice, tight with something akin to dread, a Mr. Silas Thorne, commissioned me for a restoration. An artifact, he explained, unearthed from some forgotten dig site, bore peculiar inscriptions, pulsed with an unnerving resonance beneath his touch. His insistence on my personal involvement pricked my curiosity, though skepticism warred with the gnawing need for work. Dismissing the tremors in his voice as eccentricity born of wealth, I consented. That very evening, under a bruised twilight sky, Thorne materialized, his haste palpable, leaving behind a cumbersome crate bound in weathered timber. Alone in the cavernous silence of my studio, I pried away the panels, unveiling the object of his anxiety. It stood perhaps a yard high, carved from obsidian dark stone, whose surface felt like ancient, solidified earth. Its form hinted at the human, yet twisted into something alien. Proportions skewed, the head overlarge and heavy upon a compact torso, arms folded tightly across its chest. A lacework of fine fissures marred the sternum. Where eyes should have been, there were only vacant sockets, abyssal pits that seemed, impossibly, to track my movements across the studio floor. A disquiet settled deep in my gut, a primitive awareness of being observed. Dawn found me arranging my instruments around the effigy, now centered beneath the stark glare of my workshop lamps. Chisels gleamed beside brushes, files of cleaning agents and adhesives stood ready. My task: assess its fragile integrity, mend the fractures, coax smoothness back to its weathered skin. The moment my palms met the statue's torso, a tremor answered. Faint, intimate, like the flutter of a captive bird's heart. I pressed my ear against the cold stone, straining for a sound, but silence reigned. Retracting my hand, then touching it once more, I found the vibration gone, the surface merely cool, inert. Yet the phantom pulse lingered on my fingertips. Sweat beaded on my brow. I swiped it away with a dusty forearm, dismissing the sensation as a trick of nerves, a consequence of strain. I forced myself onward. The day dissolved into meticulous labor, hours spent coaxing away centuries of impacted grime. My finest brushes navigated the delicate contours, releasing the dense perfume of ancient soil, a scent interwoven with a clinging, musty fetor that permeated my gloves. Shadows stretched long across the concrete floor, and with them grew a prickling awareness at the nape of my neck, a sense that unseen eyes witnessed my toil. Just nerves, I repeated, a mantra against the encroaching dread. As dusk deepened into night, the statue yielded more of its secrets. A face strangely smooth save for the marred suggestion of a mouth. Arms intricately etched with spirals and glyphs I couldn't decipher. Around 10, exhaustion claimed me. I extinguished the main lights, leaving only a single bulb to cast a lonely halo around the figure. Secure in the workshop, I ascended the stairs toward my living quarters above. Halfway up, a sound arrested me. A susurrus, faint as moth wings against glass, words lost in the barest exhalation. I froze, listening, straining into the shadowed void below. Silence returned. Through the railing's gap, the statue remained immobile in its pool of light. My mind playing tricks, I concluded, climbing the rest of the way to a restless bed. Sleep proved elusive. Around the spectral hour of 2, a distinct scrape echoed from below, dragging me bolt upright from the tangled sheets, heart hammering against my ribs. Flashlight beam cutting the oppressive dark, I descended, bare feet recoiling from the chill concrete. Moonlight slanted through the high windows, bathing the workshop in an ethereal glow. I approached the idol. Something was wrong. The arms, though still folded, seemed subtly rearranged, the angle altered from how I'd left them. I studied the pose, memory struggling against the unsettling present. Laying my hands upon it again, I registered a distinct unnatural warmth radiating from the stone, though the earlier vibration was absent. Had I simply misremembered? Doubts warred with a chilling conviction. Retreating toward the stairs, I couldn't dispel the invasive certainty. Within that cold, dark stone, something slumbered no more. Morning brought a forced resolve. Focus on the craft. Ignore the phantoms. My intention was to stabilize the fissures marring its torso and arms. Yet, as I applied a delicate sealant, the stone beneath my brush seemed to sigh, the existing cracks not mending but lengthening, branching into intricate, web-like patterns that snaked around the figure. These lines coalesced into forms suggestive of script, an alphabet utterly alien to my knowledge. I paused, rubbing my eyes, questioning the pressure of my own hand, but the process continued independent of my touch, a creeping transformation. A knot of nausea tightened in my stomach. Stepping back, I simply watched, the air thick with the acrid tang of solvents and the dry rasp of disturbed stone. It felt heavy, stagnant. I forced a window open, gulping the outside air before turning back to the unsettling stillness of the statue. Keep working, I commanded myself, selecting a fine-tipped tool to clear debris from the newly formed crevices. The instant the metal grazed the stone, that internal tremor returned, a distinct 2-second pulse before vanishing. A prickling sensation crawled across my scalp, my breath hitched. Just resonance, I reasoned, though I'd applied barely a whisper of force. Later, as evening shadows pooled, my gaze locked onto the statue's face. The chipped mouth. Hadn't it been merely damaged? Now, a subtle asymmetry emerged, one corner seeming to curl downwards into a nascent grimace. My pulse quickened. Logic, I pleaded internally. Stone is inert. Features remain fixed unless altered. I'd only cleaned, not carved, yet the change seemed undeniable. Fumbling for my phone, I scrolled back to the initial photographs. Zooming in, I confirmed. The damaged mouth had been flat, broken, but level. Now, unmistakably, it bore a sneer. A hand flew to my chest, feeling the frantic bird of my heart. Comprehension fractured. That night, I resolved to keep vigil, perched on a stool near my workbench, a single lamp casting stark illumination. Yet exhaustion betrayed me. I drifted off near one, jolting awake near 3, neck seized, mouth parched. My eyes shot to the statue. It had moved, shifted fractionally to the left, its heavy head now canted, as if contemplating me. A wave of icy dread washed over my skin. Scrambling up, I circled it, flashlight beam trembling across the concrete. There, undeniable, faint, raw scratches marred the floor, tracing a short path from the statue's original position to its current one, as if it had dragged itself those few inches. My hands trembled violently. Anxiety and disbelief warred within me. One impulse screamed to call Thorn, demand he retrieve this cursed thing. Another, deeper, stranger compulsion urged me onward, whispered that the work must be completed. I retreated to my bed but found no sanctuary, lying rigid beneath the covers, listening. Around 4, the whispers returned, clearer now, a low, guttural chorus of indiscernible tongues. My heart hammered. Feverish heat bloomed behind my eyes. I remained frozen, staring into the darkness until the first gray light of dawn. Daylight revealed the statue's transformation had continued. The network of cracks now formed distinct, complex sigils across its arms and torso, lines interlocking into patterns reminiscent of some archaic, forgotten script. Hours spent scouring online archives and reference texts yielded nothing. The symbols matched no known culture, no recorded alphabet. A permanent knot resided in my gut, my scalp perpetually itched, my hands rubbed together unconsciously. Each contact with the stone now brought that faint, rhythmic pulse, weak yet persistent as a hidden metronome, making me doubt my own sanity. I resumed attempts at repair, applying filler to the fissures, only to watch helplessly as new cracks bloomed elsewhere, the stone actively shrugging off my efforts. Dust choked the air, coating my tongue despite constant sips of water. By late afternoon, a frantic urgency consumed me. The thought of another night sharing space with this thing was intolerable. I worked with feverish speed, slathering epoxy, forcing the cracks closed, smoothing the surfaces with desperate energy. It was futile. Within an hour, the fissures yawned open anew, small flakes of stone sometimes shearing away spontaneously, altering the glyphs. Defeated, I switched off the tools and fled the workshop, standing in the driveway, gulping air, my shirt clinging damply to my skin. My phone vibrated. Thorn. His inquiry about progress felt loaded. I mumbled about difficulties. Heard anything? Unusual? He pressed, his voice tight. A beat of silence stretched. Revealing the truth felt dangerous. I deflected, promising to call later. No, press on, he insisted, a raw edge of worry, almost desperation, in his tone. It needs to be finished. The call ended, leaving me chilled by his palpable anxiety. He knew more, far more than he'd disclosed. That night, I double-locked the workshop, carrying the key upstairs as if it were a talisman. I'd ring the statue with extra lamps, hoping relentless light might quell its stirring. Around 11, a low, rhythmic thudding began, emanating from below, a slow, deliberate beat that pulsed through the floorboards for a solid hour. I lay rigid in bed, fists clenched, teeth grinding, a strange dizziness swirling. At midnight, the whispers commenced, sharper now, weaving intricate patterns in a language utterly alien. My chest constricted, my pulse became a frantic drum. Pacing my room, gathering fragments of courage, I finally succumbed near 1 a.m. Key in trembling hand, I unlocked the workshop and slipped inside, flashlight beam dancing ahead. The extra lamps were on, but they flickered erratically. The statue, it was leaning forward. Its arms, once tightly crossed, had visibly separated from the torso, poised as if beginning to unfold. I froze, breath catching high in my throat, palms slick with cold sweat. Wiping them on my trousers, I took a hesitant step, nearly tripping over a discarded chisel. The statue's head was bowed, the glowing fissures, yes, glowing, like embers embedded in the stone, had crept up its neck. The light was faint, yet undeniable. my stomach clenched. A high whine filled my ears, the very air seeming to thin and press inwards. The lamps flickered violently. Was I hallucinating? Reaching out a hesitant, trembling hand, I touched the stone. It was warm, pulsing with a vitality far stronger than before. A galvanic shock shot up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if burned, stumbling away. Grabbing a rag, I scrubbed at my face, thoughts chaotic, cold sweat tracing paths down my spine. It looked poised on the verge of animation. The space between its arms and torso had widened further. The cracked mouth seemed stretched, agape. The strobing lights lent it a horrifying illusion of respiration. Retreating slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on it, I fought for rationality. "Impossible," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Stone does not move." But the evidence screamed otherwise. An idea sparked, restraint. Fetching heavy-duty canvas straps used for securing sculptures during transit, I approached the figure, muscles tensed, half expecting a sudden movement, a lashing out. My heart pounded against my ribs like a frantic prisoner. With shaking hands, I looped the thick belts around its torso and arms, cinching them brutally tight, anchoring them to the statue's heavy base with reinforced knots. Throughout the process, the stone thrummed beneath the canvas, a deep, resonant vibration that sickened me. Finally finished, panting, I stepped back. The straps held the arms immobile, pressed firmly against the body. The faint, ember glow still pulsed within the cracks, but the statue itself remained bound, quiescent. I remained in the workshop until the first hint of dawn bruised the sky, pacing the confines like a caged animal. Periodically, I checked the restraints. They held firm, yet beneath them, new hairline fractures spiderwebbed downwards from the base, creeping along the statue's legs. Soft, popping sounds punctuated the silence, the audible protest of stressed stone. I tried playing music on my phone, loud, abrasive, anything to banish the insidious whispers, but they persisted, weaving themselves beneath the melodies. As morning fully broke, the internal glow subsided, leaving only the intricate map of fissures and that lingering, unnerving sense of latent breath within the stone. With the false courage of daylight, I called Thorne. My voice, thin and reedy, relayed my inability to proceed, hinting at the phenomena. His response was immediate, cutting through my explanation. "Finish it. Whatever it takes. There's a significant bonus." Money. It felt obscene, juxtaposed against the night's horrors. Yet, alongside the fear, a perverse curiosity gnawed, a compulsion to witness the conclusion of this unnatural drama. I hesitated, then, against all reason, acquiesced. "One more call," I stated flatly, "when it's done." The final day was a surreal exercise in containment and futility. I periodically tightened the straining belts, watching the statue with the wary attention one affords a venomous creature. I continued the motions of restoration, patching, smoothing, though the actions felt hollow, meaningless. Each application of epoxy met with that familiar, resonant tremor from within. By late afternoon, the strange glyphs had proliferated, covering nearly the entire surface in ordered lines, complex geometries of curves, triangles, spirals. They possessed a disturbing optical quality, seeming to writhe or rearrange themselves at the periphery of my vision, always settling into a new configuration the moment I looked away and back again. As evening bled the color from the sky, my own endurance frayed. Eyes burning, back screaming, fingers raw. I felt adrift, questioning the very fabric of my reality. Yet the evidence remained stark. The impossible cracks, the unnatural warmth, the spectral lights, the insidious whispers. A fleeting, violent urge arose to take a sledgehammer to the damned thing. But the thought alone caused a visceral constriction in my chest, a powerful internal resistance. Something ancient and vast resided within or was tied to this effigy. I felt it with bone-deep certainty. It strained towards release, towards awakening, and my unwilling hands were its key. Night descended fully. The workshop lights hummed their electric dirge above the still-strapped figure. I locked the door but couldn't leave, standing just outside, listening. The slow, rhythmic thudding returned, vibrating up through the concrete beneath my feet, echoing the pounding in my skull. Exhaustion warred with a terrible magnetic pull. Returning inside, I resumed my vigil on the stool, flashlight aimed like a weapon. The cracks pulsed with faint luminescence. The canvas belts groaned under invisible pressure. I watched the stone strain against its bonds, felt the nascent movement of the arms seeking freedom. Placing a hand over my hammering heart, a single, cold thought crystallized. Finish it. Perhaps completion was the only path to cessation, the only way to be rid of it. Grasping my chisels, I approached, mind narrowing to the task. I worked mechanically, chipping away loose flakes. The statue thrummed under my touch, the vibration traveling up my arm, making my wrist ache. The glow intensified with my efforts. The symbols seemed to bloom across the surface. I forced epoxy into the fissures, smoothed, sealed, my clothes plastered to my skin with sweat, the air thick with the miasma of chemicals and ancient, disturbed earth. For hours I labored, a grim automaton, ignoring the creak of straps, the subtle shifts of the stone beneath my hands, the clatter of dropped tools. Smooth, fill, seal, repeat. Abruptly, it was over. The cracks ceased their relentless spread. The internal light guttered and died. The statue became quiescent, though the low resonant hum persisted, a tangible vibration in the air. I stepped back, gasping, a confusing wave of relief washing over the deeper ocean of dread. From a purely technical perspective, the restoration was complete. Yet the presence I felt emanating from the figure was more potent, more palpable than ever. In the blue, pre-dawn light, I called Thorne. My voice was a ragged tremor as I reported the work finished. "Are you well?" he inquired, a flicker of something unreadable in his tone. "Fine," I lied, the word hollow. He promised to arrive soon to collect his prize. The line went dead. I stood motionless, staring at the bound idol, its crudely repaired mouth agape, its socketed eyes void black. The straps held for now, but I knew with chilling certainty it was merely a pause. My body screamed for rest, but sleep felt like a distant country I might never visit again. So now I wait. The effigy stands sentinel in the heart of my desecrated workshop, mended, bound, yet thrumming with that ceaseless low vibration. Words fail to encompass the experience. Explanation feels futile. My pulse remains a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Goose flesh prickles my arms in the cool morning air. If I hold my breath, listen past the hum, the whispers are still there, insidious, coiling at the edges of hearing. I have no conception of what follows Thorne's arrival, what latent power resides within this stone figure, or what dam I might have irrevocably breached by completing its restoration. There is no retreat. I linger by the door, one hand resting upon the cold metal, the other gripping my flashlight like a forgotten weapon, straining for the sound of approaching tires. Waiting to expel this intrusion from my life, while burdened by the sickening premonition that what I have touched, what I have inadvertently aided, may never truly leave. A brittle percussion, wood snapping under unseen weight, shattered the forest's composure, arresting my steps. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat as eyes raked the tangled green depths, hunting the disturbance. Then, materializing from the ferns, a figure. Small, impossibly so, a boy, perhaps 8 summers old, dragging one leg as he stumbled toward us, his face a canvas streaked with grime and tears. In that instant, ignorant of the abyss yawning before us, I saw only a child adrift. My name is Elias. The wilderness has been my sanctuary, my escape, for the better part of my years. This expedition, deep into the untamed heart of the northern ranges, promised camaraderie and quietude, a weekend shared with my closest companions, Clara and Leo. We sought the embrace of untouched woodland, far from the well-trodden paths and tourist hum. We craved solitude's gentle whisper. We found something else entirely waiting in the sylvan shadows. 4 hours we'd trekked, the rhythm of boots on earth a steady beat, when the first tendrils of sound reached us. A keening, thin and high. Easily dismissed at first as wind sighing through pines, perhaps the cry of a distant hawk. But the path led us closer, the sound solidifying, undeniably human, laced with raw distress. "Do you hear that?" Clara murmured, her brow knitting, concern etching lines around her eyes. Leo, already angling off the worn track toward the lament, simply nodded. "Sounds like a child. We need to see." And then he emerged, slipping from behind the ancient girth of an oak. Slight, almost frail, swallowed by clothes torn and stained by the forest floor. His left leg buckled with each hesitant step, his face a muddy ruin washed clean only by the tracks of his weeping. "Hello there," I offered, my voice softened, approaching as one might a startled fawn. "Are you all right? Where are your parents?" His lower lip quivered, a prelude to speech. I fell. My leg hurts. A fresh wave of tears spilled over. "I can't find my family. Lost." Clara knelt instantly, the healer in her surfacing as she gently probed the injured limb. "Doesn't feel fractured, but he shouldn't bear weight on it. He needs help." Leo, meanwhile, was already digging through his pack for the medical kit. "What's your name, son?" he asked. "Finn," the boy sniffled, rubbing his eyes with a dirty fist. "Please, help me find them. They'll be so scared." Our eyes met, Clara's, Leo's, mine, a silent, instantaneous accord passing between us. Of course, we would help. The alternative was unthinkable. "Don't you worry, Finn," I reassured him, forcing confidence into my tone. "We'll get you back. Where did you see them last?" Finn lifted a trembling hand, pointing deeper into the woods, away from any semblance of a trail. "Camping, over there, near a big rock. Looks like a bear sleeping." A filament of unease tightened in my gut. Camping so far off-piste, especially with the child, felt reckless. But the boy's plight eclipsed the thought. finding his family was paramount. Flanked by Clara and Leo, who offered sturdy support, Finn began the slow journey. I pushed ahead, my hiking pole swishing through dense thickets, forging a path. As we moved, Finn recounted his tale. A family camping trip, a moment of solitary exploration turned into disorientation and fear. Yet, his narrative seemed to shift subtly with each retelling, small inconsistencies snagging at the edge of my awareness. I dismissed them as the fragmented memories of a frightened, hurting child. Stress addles the mind, especially a young one. Perhaps 20 minutes passed, marked only by the crunch of leaves and Finn's occasional whimper, when a profound stillness descended. The forest held its breath. No birdsong, no scuttling unseen creatures in the leaf litter, only a heavy, watchful silence that pressed in on us. "Anyone else?" I began, keeping my voice hushed. "Does this feel wrong?" Before either could respond, Finn piped up, a sudden brightness in his voice. "Almost there, just through these trees." We pushed past a final screen of dense pines and stepped into a small, sun-dappled clearing. Dominating its center was a hulking boulder, weathered and moss-covered, undeniably resembling a slumbering ursine form, but the clearing was empty, utterly devoid of life or recent passage. No tent impressions, no blackened circle of a fire pit, no scattered gear. Nothing. "Finn," Clara said, her voice gentle but firm, "are you certain this is the spot?" The boy nodded with emphatic conviction. "Yes, this is it. They must be nearby. Mom, Dad, I'm here." His shout, thin and reedy, struck the surrounding trees and fell dead, absorbed by the unnerving quiet. Then, from the far side of the clearing came an answer. Not the anxious cries of relieved parents. Laughter, cold, grating laughter that scraped like stones down my spine. 3 figures detached themselves from the shadowed tree line. Rough men, faces obscured by untrimmed beards, eyes like chips of flint. Each cradled a rifle, the weapon held with a chilling, lazy familiarity. "Good work, Finn," rasped one, clearly their leader. "Brought us some fine prizes, you did." Ice flooded my veins. The realization struck with the force of a physical blow. We hadn't found a lost boy. We'd walked willingly into a meticulously laid snare. Finn wasn't lost. He was the lure. "What is this?" Leo demanded, instinctively shoving Clara and the boy behind him. The leader offered a smile devoid of warmth, all teeth and menace. "What this is," he drawled, "is you folks handing over packs, wallets, watches, anything shiny. Behave yourselves and maybe we let you walk away." Clara's fingers dug into my arm, a desperate anchor. My thoughts fractured, scrambling for an escape route, any exit from this sudden nightmare. Outnumbered, unarmed, no signal bars on our phones this deep, utterly, terrifyingly alone. "All right," I forced the word out, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "Okay, take what you want, just no one gets hurt." The leader gestured curtly to his companions, who advanced with predatory intent, their grins widening. As one reached for Clara's backpack, my gaze locked with Leo's across the small space. A flicker, a barely perceptible nod. Decades of friendship forged a silent language. He had something in mind. It detonated in a heartbeat. As the man's hand closed on Clara's pack strap, Leo roared, "Run!" Simultaneously, he shoved the man with explosive force. The bandit staggered backward, colliding with his cohort. We didn't need a second invitation. We bolted, plunging into the dense undergrowth, abandoning all thought of trails or direction. Only distance mattered. Crashing, tearing, stumbling, pure, unadulterated flight. Shots cracked behind us, the sharp reports echoing unnaturally in the clearing, followed by the whine of projectiles splintering bark scant inches away. Clara cried out, a sound of pure terror, and I seized her hand, dragging her forward. "Don't stop," I gasped. "Keep moving." We ran until our lungs screamed for air and our legs turned to leaden weights. The sounds of pursuit eventually dwindled, lost in the muffling density of the woods, but sheer terror propelled us onward. Finally, after an eternity compressed into perhaps 20 minutes, we burst from the trees onto the unexpected grit of a dirt road, and there, shimmering like a mirage in the distance, a small, isolated gas station. We staggered toward it, breath sobbing in our chests, collapsing through the door. The lone clerk stared, eyes wide at our disheveled state. Scratched, filthy, faces masks of residual panic. "Please," I choked out between ragged breaths. "Call the police. Attacked. In the woods." The hours that followed dissolved into a haze of flashing lights, probing questions from uniformed officers, and the gentle ministrations of paramedics checking scrapes and bruises. As the adrenaline ebbed, the chilling reality seeped in. We had brushed against something truly dark and barely slipped free. A search party combed the area described, but the woods yielded no trace of the men or the small, treacherous boy. The officers confirmed similar incidents. Hikers lured from trails, robbed, but the calculated use of a child as bait, they admitted grimly, was a horrifying new wrinkle. In the subsequent days and weeks, the forest's echo lingered. Every sudden noise made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat. The wilderness, once my solace, now felt menacing, fraught with unseen dangers. Yet, time began its slow work. I refused to surrender the trails to fear. Cautiously, I returned, never again alone, always hyper-vigilant, armed now with awareness as much as supplies. I enrolled in self-defense courses, learned to read the landscape with new eyes. The ordeal irrevocably altered me, layering caution over my love for the wild, but paradoxically deepening my appreciation for simple kindness. For every predator lurking, countless others offer help without hesitation. Finn often drifts into my thoughts. Was he a coerced pawn in their cruel game, or a willing participant? A victim himself, perhaps? The truth remains lost in those woods, likely forever. I can only hope, wherever he is, that he found an escape from that desolate life. As for me, the call of the wild persists. When I lace my boots now, stepping onto the path, I carry the weight of that day, a constant reminder nestled alongside my compass and water bottle. Every rustle in the undergrowth, each snapped twig, still sends a jolt of tension through me. But I push past it. I will not allow one monstrous encounter to steal the beauty, the solace, the wonder that the wilderness still holds. It harbors darkness, yes, but also profound light. And ultimately, I choose to seek the light, forever mindful of the lesson etched into my soul. Sometimes, the most dangerous creatures in the deep woods are the ones who walk upright. Regret, sharp and sudden as a shard of glass, pierced me the instant my fingers closed around the worn leather spine. I should have fled the Whispering Pines Lodge then and there, abandoned that desolate outpost clinging precariously to the edge of the highway. But a siren song of curiosity hummed beneath my fatigue, and before the true depth of my blunder registered, the current had already pulled me under. It was meant to be transient, merely a pause in the relentless westward spool of asphalt unwinding towards a new life, a promised job shimmering on the Californian horizon. The lodge itself offered little solace to the eye, a 2-story carcass of a building, timbers groaning under the weight of forgotten decades, perhaps dreaming fitfully of its prime somewhere lost in the hazy 70s. Yet it promised sanctuary at a pittance, and the miles had scoured my resolve raw. Thus, I surrendered, guiding my car into the sparsely populated lot as the sky bled violet and orange. Within the lobby, the air hung thick, a stagnant cocktail of phantom cigarettes and cloying, cheap deodorizer. Residing over this dim domain was a woman, Agnes, her gaze distant, anchored to a dog-eared magazine, the topography of faded tattoos mapping her forearms beneath a permanent frown, etched by time or bitterness. She barely registered my presence, sliding the key to room 8 across the scarred counter. "Checkout's 11, she rasped, a sound like stones shifting in a dry creek bed, her attention already retreating. A tremor, almost imperceptible, in her hand as she named the room. A flicker in those flinty eyes, signals I should have heeded. But exhaustion was a leaden cloak, my vision blurred by the hypnotic monotony of the road. Sleep, preceded by the simple absolution of a shower, was my only desire. Room 8 was a study in faded glory. Wallpaper blooming with spectral floral patterns, a double bed whose springs sighed with the memory of countless transient souls, a television set squatting like a relic from the age of lunar broadcasts. Still, a certain tidiness prevailed, and the shower, blessedly, offered vigorous, steaming water. Just as a fragile hope for undisturbed rest began to bloom, my eye snagged on it, a sliver of darkness protruding from beneath the bed's dusty valance. Detritus, I presumed, the careless leavings of a prior occupant. Curiosity, that persistent devil, urged me closer. Bending low, I saw not trash, but a book. A diary, its leather cover buffed smooth by the passage of years and hands, ancient and weary. I ought never to have breached its pages. That knowledge is a cold certainty now. Then, however, it seemed an innocuous find, a forgotten repository of tedious travelogues or perhaps dry business annotations. Indeed, the initial entries confirmed this banality. Observations on commerce, complaints about capricious weather, the unremarkable minutiae of a journey. Yet, as I navigated deeper, the ink seemed to quicken, the script fraying into urgency, sentences fractured. Something is fundamentally wrong here, one passage declared, the letters tight with tension. The walls, I swear they shift when my back is turned, and the sounds after dark. Merciful heavens, the sounds. An icy rivulet traced its path down my spine, yet fascination held me captive. The subsequent entry plunged deeper into shadow. Attempted departure today. The door refused, bolted fast, though I never turned the lock, wrestled it open finally, only to find the corridor altered. It stretched infinitely, a canyon of numbered doors receding into gloom. This cannot be. This is unreality. My own hands had begun to tremble, mirroring the frantic script I devoured. Page after page chronicled escalating dread, shadows detaching themselves from corners to glide with silent purpose, sibilant whispers bleeding through the thin plaster, a nocturnal presence, sensed more than seen, standing the sentinel beside the bed, observing. The final inscription, a near illegible scrawl clawed onto the paper. Reader, if these words find you, flee. Flee now whilst you still can, before this place consumes you, as it has me, as it has us all. With a gasp, I snapped the diary shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. A hoax, surely? An elaborate jest conceived by some bored traveler to unnerve the next? Yet, as I sat there, the very atmosphere of the room seemed to curdle, growing palpably colder. The shadows pooled in the corners acquiring a depth, a sentience they hadn't possessed moments before. Real or imagined, I wouldn't linger for the denouement. Snatching my luggage, I lunged for the door. The handle remained stubbornly inert. I threw my weight against it, futile. It felt fused to the frame. Panic, cold and sharp, began its insidious creep. The window, then. Escape through there. But it too resisted, sealed tight against my frantic efforts. It was then, peering through the grimy pane, that a sight arrested me, chilling the marrow in my bones. The parking lot, nearly vacant upon my arrival, now teemed with automobiles. Not just any cars, but relics from bygone eras, spectral chariots from the 50s onward, ranked in silent congregation, each veiled in a thick shroud of dust, immobile as statues entombed by time. Recoiling from the window, my thoughts fragmented. A hallucination? The product of profound weariness? I squeezed my eyes shut, commanding normalcy with a measured breath, counting slowly to 10. 1, 2, 3. A sound surfaced, faint but undeniable, a dry, skittering noise from within the walls. 4, 5, 6. Was the room shrinking, the walls subtly encroaching, or was it merely fear's distortion? 7, 8, 9. The scratching intensified, now interwoven with whispers, indistinct yet unnervingly close. 10. My eyes snapped open. The room retained its familiar shabbiness, yet the air crackled with an alien energy, raising the fine hairs on my arms. And the door. The door stood ajar, yawning open onto a hallway that defied perspective, stretching away into an endless Stygian vanishing point. Every nerve screamed caution. Stay. Wait for daylight. This must be a nightmare, vivid but transient. Yet the room itself felt predatory now, the whispers coalescing, the shadows seeming to reach. I couldn't remain. Hesitantly, compelled by a force stronger than reason, I stepped across the threshold. Instantly, the mundane dissolved. The threadbare carpet and peeling paint evaporated, supplanted by lustrous dark wood underfoot and walls adorned with intricate, subtly shimmering damask. Doors, identical and imposing, flanked the corridor, marching inexorably into the gloom in both directions. I began to walk, propelled by the desperate need for stairs, an elevator, any egress back to the lobby, back to the world I knew. But the corridor offered no reprieve, only an infinite recursion of doors. Time lost its mooring. Minutes, hours, perhaps days bled together in that endless passage. Occasionally, muffled sounds seeped from behind the closed doors, snippets of conversation, stifled weeping. Once, chillingly, I thought I heard my own laughter echoing from some forgotten moment. Finally, depleted, teetering on the precipice of collapse, I halted before a door indistinguishable from the countless others. Some intuition, perhaps a nascent recognition buried deep within, guided my hand. The knob turned effortlessly. I stepped inside my own past. Not room 8, but my childhood bedroom, resurrected in meticulous detail from the strata of memory. Familiar toys lay scattered, posters of ephemeral idols adorned the walls, and seated on the bed, regarding me with a smile that failed to ignite her eyes, was myself, age 10. "You're here at last," she murmured, her voice strangely resonant, layered. "We've waited such a long time." I stumbled backward, shaking my head, denying the impossible tableau. Turning to flee, I found the hallway vanished. Instead, another room materialized, my college dormitory, stark and familiar, and another Ilara, older now, perched at the desk. "You don't recall?" she inquired softly. "Checking in, just as we all did." I spun, disoriented, only to confront yet another scene, another iteration of myself. My first apartment, a former office space, transient lodgings from vacations and business trips long past. Each contained an echo of me, their eyes mirroring the same profound, inescapable sadness. "Leaving isn't an option," they intoned, a soft, chilling chorus. "None of us ever leave. This is where we reside now." Something fundamental fractured within me. Memories, submerged and unbidden, surged forth. Recollections of arriving at this very motel, not once, but countless times. Of discovering the diary, the desperate attempts at escape, the inevitable return. I crumpled to my knees as the crushing weight of understanding settled. The cross-country journey had never begun. I had always been here, ensnared in this architectural anomaly, condemned to perpetually reenact this horrifying arrival. As realization dawned, the phantom rooms dissolved like mist. I found myself once more within the confines of room 8. It was precisely as I had first encountered it, down to the corner of the diary peeking from beneath the bed. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I retrieved it, opening it to the final, damning page. There, inscribed in handwriting I recognized with sickening certainty as my own, was a fresh entry. "Reader, if these words find you, flee. Flee now, whilst you still can, before this place consumes you, as it has me, as it has us all." Replacing the diary in its hiding place, I sank onto the edge of the sagging mattress and waited. Presently, a knock would sound upon the door. A new arrival for room 8. The cycle, immutable and eternal, would commence anew. For that is the essential truth of the Whispering Pines Lodge. Check-in is always possible, but check-out is a forgotten concept. A jolt, somewhere near the second hour past midnight, tore Elias from sleep. His skull throbbed, a dull drumbeat tuned to the stale air and the ancient hum of wiring entombed within the concrete shell he called home. Solitude was his neighbor in this derelict stack, a place chosen for its quiet indifference. Here, fissures spiderwebbed the plaster, floors listed subtly askew, and the paint on every door showed its age in flakes and fading hues. The corridors offered no comfort, only stark conduits, weeping pipes, and the cheapest sort of light fixtures cast in a jaundiced glow. No one cared for company. The few tenants scattered through mostly vacant units were phantoms themselves, their silence a shared, unspoken pact. Elias resided on the 3rd floor, his windows overlooking a choked artery of an alley, perpetually strewn with the skeletal remains of furniture and the rusted hulks of bins. Their fetid breath coiled upwards whenever he dared crack the glass, a miasma he mostly kept sealed away. Tonight, though, the apartment felt suffocating, its stillness thick and heavy. The rhythmic knocking of the hot water pipes punctuated the low, insistent buzz from the kitchen's fluorescent tube. He needed air, something less contained. Clad in worn sweatpants and a thin jacket, Elias slipped his feet into shoes and eased into the hallway. The door exhaled a weary squeak into the gloom. Down the corridor, a single bulb near the stairwell spasmed, painting the mold-scented air in erratic strokes. From behind a distant wall seeped the muffled, distorted burble of a television. His own footfalls were loud, echoing companions as he ascended the concrete steps. Reaching the top floor, he shoved against the heavy metal door, yielding passage to the terrace. Emptiness greeted him. Below, the city was a scattering of distant, diluted lights, a faint incandescence beneath the sky clotted with cloud, swallowing the stars. A few remote rooftops broke the horizon line. The roof itself, edged by a low parapet, was desolate save for a cluster of skeletal metal chairs cast aside, attended by a few empty beer bottles glinting dully. Elias drew a breath, then another. The air here was cooler, damp against his skin. He ambled towards the precipice, leaned into the void, and scanned the familiar clutter of the alley below. Nothing stirred. Quietude reigned. Turning to retreat, his gaze snagged. Something was perched upon the parapet. Humanoid in scale, perhaps marginally smaller, its skin possessed a grayish pallor, dry and disturbingly uneven, like old parchment. It was hunched, balanced on its hands that were fundamentally wrong, fingers elongated and crooked, knuckles protruding at unnatural angles. And it was looking directly at him. Its eyes were stark, narrow fissures devoid of color, simply black apertures punched into the face. A chill radiated through Elias's shoulders. His stomach clenched tight. The air caught, trapped in his throat. He saw the thing's chest rise and fall with shallow, deliberate breaths. No sound issued from it, no movement beyond that slow respiration. He recoiled a step, his back colliding with the rusted metal flank of an old ventilation shaft. The sharp scent of decay filled his nostrils. Panic bloomed directionless. The creature remained immobile, a silent sentinel. His eyes darted towards the door, the thought of escape a sudden, desperate flare. When his gaze snapped back to the parapet, the space was empty. It hadn't moved. It had simply ceased to be there. The parapet stood vacant. The discarded chairs and bottles remained exactly as they were. Hesitantly, Elias approached the edge again, peering down, searching for any trace. Below lay only the familiar darkness of the alley, the slick gleam of wet concrete. He swept his gaze across the rooftop, utterly deserted, as if it had dissolved into the damp night air. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Sweat prickled his skin. He felt absurdly exposed, standing alone under the occluded sky, the lingering sensation of being watched crawling over him like an insect. The roof no longer felt like refuge. He turned, hurrying back towards the stairs, the metal door groaning shut behind him. The top-floor corridor seemed colder now, the lights dimmer than he remembered. He descended quickly, his steps echoing unnervingly until he reached his own door. Inside, he threw the lock, the deadbolt sliding home with a decisive thud. He checked the window latches, then flipped on every light, bathing the small space in the humming, buzzing glow of cheap fixtures. He stood there, gulping air, straining to hear anything beyond the building's usual groans. Silence answered at first. He went to the bathroom, splashed frigid water on his face. It ran rust-colored initially, then cleared. His reflection stared back, tired, red-rimmed eyes and a pale face. A faint tremor agitated his hands. The image of the gray entity, those void-like eyes, refused to dissipate. What had it been? Humanoid, yet utterly alien. Returning to the living room, he considered reading, perhaps the television, but focus was impossible. His thoughts kept snapping back to the rooftop encounter. Then a sound began, a faint, metallic scraping from within the walls, like a loose pipe shifting, hesitant at first. He tracked it to a corner of the room. The sound migrated, now seemingly above him, traveling along the path of pipes concealed in the ceiling cavity. It slithered slowly, then paused. Elias stood frozen, listening. A minute stretched, taut and silent. Nothing more, just the old building settling, he tried to persuade himself. Old noises in an old place. But then the lights faltered. The kitchen fluorescent stuttered, dimmed to near darkness, then flared back to life. The lamp beside the couch mirrored the disturbance. Elias craned his neck, surveying the room. It felt smaller, constricted. He couldn't pinpoint why. The worn couch, the cheap coffee table, the television on its particle board stand, the barren shelves, all occupied their usual positions. Yet the oppressive sense of the walls pressing inwards was undeniable. Forcing himself onto the couch, he concentrated on regulating his breathing. An hour bled away. The television droned on low volume, some forgotten late-night broadcast flickering unnoticed. The lights convulsed again. A sharp, popping noise echoed from the hallway just outside his door. A quick, brittle snap, like stressed metal yielding. He rose, crept to the door, pressed his ear against the wood. A whisper, a sigh, something indistinct, barely audible. He drew back the lock, opened the door a mere fraction. The corridor stretched away, dim and silent. The bulb at the far end flickered once, twice, then held steady. Nothing else. He eased the door shut. Turning back into the apartment, a prickling sensation crawled up the nape of his neck. The undeniable feeling of presence, of not being alone, settled heavily in the manufactured silence. He moved to the kitchen, rummaged in a drawer, and withdrew a heavy-duty screwdriver. The weight felt solid, grounding, though he had no clear idea what defense it might offer. He clutched it tightly and drifted towards the window. Through the grimy pane, the alley and a slice of the neighboring building's brickwork were visible. His own reflection floated there, ordinary, just weary. Then, behind his reflected shoulder, a shape darted, low and swift. He spun, screwdriver raised defensively. Nothing. Only the familiar shapes of his sparse furniture. His heart resumed its frantic pace. He checked behind the couch, peered under the table, even flung open the meager coat closet. Empty. His mouth felt like dust. He retrieved a bottle of water from the kitchen, but the first sip tasted unnervingly metallic. He spat it into the sink. Beneath the basin, a pipe shuddered violently. Kneeling, he peered into the cabinet. The plumbing was ancient, furred with rust. A single bead of water swelled on a joint, detached, and struck the cabinet floor with a dull, final tap. He extinguished all lights save for the single lamp by the couch and attempted sleep. Curling into a corner of the sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket, he kept his gaze fixed on the door. Sleep remained elusive. Each time his eyelids drooped, the gray figure materialized against the darkness, those vacant slits staring. He forced his eyes open, anchoring himself to the side of the locked door. Minutes congealed. The faint tapping resumed within the walls, a furtive rhythm he tried to ignore. At some point, exhaustion must have claimed him, because he startled awake abruptly. The lamp was flickering erratically. His watch showed nearly 4 in the morning. The tapping was louder now, more insistent, unmistakably the sound of something navigating the building's hidden arteries. Rising, screwdriver still gripped in his hand, Elias moved into his small entryway. The apartment door remained secured. The hallway outside appeared unchanged, yet felt profoundly dimmer. He stepped out, the cold, uneven floor pressing through the thin soles of his shoes. Slowly, cautiously, he advanced along the corridor, listening intently. A metallic scraping emanated from the far end near the stairwell. As he drew closer, the sound ceased abruptly. He peered down the concrete steps into the layered darkness of the lower floors. The building's chronic dimness seemed amplified tonight, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and settled dust. His hand found the rough, cold railing. Then, a noise directly overhead. He tilted his head back. A light fixture, several floors above, buzzed violently, flickered, and died. Retreat seemed the only sane option. He turned back towards his apartment, but the corridor seemed to have elongated. His door, visible in the distance, felt impossibly far away, the space between him and it stretching like elastic. He quickened his pace, his footsteps echoing with alarming clarity. Reaching the door breathless, he fumbled with the lock and hurried inside. Back within his 4 walls, dizziness washed over him. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, listening to the ragged sound of his own breathing. The sense of the creature's presence lingered, an invisible film coating everything. He switched the television back on, low volume, needing the distraction. Static snowed across the screen for a moment before resolving into some dated sitcom rerun. The canned laughter sounded hollow, alien. He fought for calm. The thought of fleeing the building surfaced, but the prospect of wandering the pre-dawn streets in his current state, with nowhere to go, held its own terror. Perhaps the lobby, the threshold to the outside world, might offer some psychological buffer. Keys in hand, he ventured out again. Descending the stairs, he became acutely aware of the pipes running overhead. They rattled softly, intermittently, like something tapping Morse code from within. He actively resisted imagining what might be inside them. The lobby was a small, neglected space, illuminated by a single sputtering bulb above the glass front door. Beyond the glass, the street lay deserted except for a few parked cars and a solitary cat investigating a dumpster. mundane reality. He stood by the door, the urge to flee warring with inertia. He was in sweatpants, a thin jacket, holding keys and a screwdriver. No wallet, no phone. Stepping out like this felt like surrendering to madness. He turned, his gaze fallen on the hallway leading back to the stairwell. For a fleeting instant, it seemed a warp, the lines bending inwards as if viewed through flawed glass. He blinked, and the illusion vanished. Just the building, playing tricks on his exhausted eyes. He would return to his apartment, wait for daylight. Surely the sun would dispel these shadows. Climbing back up, the scraping noise in the pipes seemed louder, accompanied now by a faint odor like burnt dust. He scanned the walls, noticing small, dark stains on the cracked paint that hadn't registered before. Reaching his floor, the hallway lights flickered in greeting. He walked to his door, shut tight, unlocked it, and slipped inside, immediately securing the chain lock. Another meticulous search. Bathroom, closet, under the bed frame, behind the couch. Nothing. He was alone. He cracked the window slightly, seeking fresh air, but the breeze carried the familiar taint of alley rot. He sealed it shut again. He slid down the wall opposite the door, sitting on the floor, screwdriver resting heavily in his lap. Every muscle remained coiled, anticipating something. He listened to the pipes creak, subside into silence. The lights hummed their low, steady song. Far off, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He rubbed his stinging eyes. Another hour crawled past, closer to 5 now. The faintest suggestion of dawn might soon stain the eastern sky. He rose, went to the window. Only darkness remained, punctuated by the distant glow of streetlights. No sign of morning yet. He moved to the door, listening. The hallway beyond seemed quiet now. He opened the door a crack. It looked normal. He stepped out, a tightness constricting his chest. The light overhead flickered. His eyes went to the end of the corridor. A shape coalesced in the dimness, amorphous, like a deeper shadow against the gloom. He squinted, trying to resolve it, and it vanished. His heart leapt again. He retreated into his apartment, locked the door, and leaned against it, breathing slowly through his nose, his head aching fiercely. He sat on the couch again, switching off the television. Silence felt preferable now. He focused on the rhythm of his own breathing, the solid weight of the screwdriver in his hand, knuckles white from the pressure. His shoulders throbbed with tension. His mouth was parched. He drank water from the tap. It tasted stale, but the metallic tang was gone. He swallowed slowly. The hours stretched, thinning towards morning. Around 6, the first meager hint of daylight filtered through the dirty window pane. The building's nocturnal noises began to subside. The pipes settled into their usual distant clicks and groans. The lights remained steady. Checking the hallway one more time, it appeared blessedly normal in length and aspect. Nothing lurked in the shadows. He sat by the window, watching the alley gradually gain definition, the outlines of trash cans and broken furniture emerging from the gloom. The sky overhead was a uniform, uninspiring gray. The fear hadn't vanished, but the feeling of being trapped had lessened its grip. What transpired in the night remained opaque, inexplicable. The rooftop encounter felt undeniable, as did the subsequent strangeness that had permeated the building. But now, in the weak light of early morning, a fragile quiet held sway. Elias stood, stretching stiff limbs. The unease persisted, a low hum beneath the surface, the sense that something could reappear without warning. He forced himself towards normalcy, making instant coffee. It tasted foul, but the warmth was grounding. He paced his small apartment, checking each room again in the revealing light. Everything appeared ordinary. He felt compelled to return to the roof, a reluctant pilgrimage driven by the need to see it in the daylight. The stairwell smelled of little more than old dust. The terrace door complained with its usual squeak. The rooftop lay empty under the gray sky. Chairs, bottles, the low parapet, all unchanged. He looked over the edge. The city was stirring below. The distant sounds of traffic, a slamming door somewhere far off, no trace of the gray figure. He stood for a minute, arms crossed against the cool morning air washing over his face. Then he turned and descended, his hand steady on the railing this time. He reached his floor, walked the familiar length of the hallway. Chipped paint, uneven floorboards, just a hallway. He unlocked his door, stepped inside. The apartment smelled of stale coffee and yesterday's air. He threw the window open wide, letting the morning in. It wasn't fresh, carrying the city's usual grime, but it lacked the suffocating weight of the night. He didn't know what the thing was. He didn't understand its appearance or the unsettling resonance it left within the building's very structure. He knew only profound exhaustion and a persistent, gnawing edge of fear. He sat down, trying to rest, trying to believe he could navigate the coming day. He would remain here, quiet, hoping its visit was singular, an aberration never to be repeated. He tried not to summon the image of pupilless eyes, not to listen too closely for scraping in the pipes. He just absorbed the sounds of the waking city outside and kept his gaze drifting towards the doorway, waiting, vigilant, just in case. Overhead, a sign pulsed with a sickly violet luminescence, its stuttering light painting my windshield in bruises. The lamplight spoon. Road hypnosis had rendered most markers illegible blurs across the endless tarmac, yet this one snagged my vision. Perhaps its erratic flicker resonated with my own frayed nerves, or maybe simple, desperate thirst propelled me. Whatever the reason, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires felt inevitable. For leagues, no other headlights had sliced the oppressive dark. The highway unfurled behind and ahead, a desolate artery through an anatomy of absolute night. Only the diner's windows offered solace, rectangles of warm, buttery light wherein indistinct shapes moved, proving I wasn't utterly alone in seeking shelter from the vast, swallowing emptiness. A brittle chime announced my entrance as the door yielded, exhaling a gust of warm, thick air. It smelled of stale coffee grounds and something frying, a scent both nostalgic and vaguely wrong, clinging like a shroud. From behind the counter, a woman's head snapped up. Her smile stretched wide, unnervingly immediate, as if I were an expected, long overdue arrival. "Evening, sugar," she purred, her voice dripping saccharine. "Just yourself tonight?" A curt nod served as my reply. I slid into a booth near the window, the crimson vinyl sign under my weight. An unnatural quiet permeated the space. Diners hummed, didn't they? With the clatter of plates, the hiss of the grill, the low murmur of conversation or a crackling radio. This place, however, was steeped in a silence so profound it buzzed against the eardrums. 4, perhaps 5 other souls dotted the interior, yet an unnerving quality clung to them. No one ate, no one spoke, no screens glowed in their hands. They simply sat, postures rigid, gazes fixed on some unseen point straight ahead. The woman, Agnes presumably, proprietor of the Lamplight Spoon, glided over, menu in hand, though I waved it away. "Coffee's fine, thank you," I managed, trying hard to ignore the relentless, painted curve of her lips as she retreated. My gaze, against my will, snagged on the man occupying the booth opposite. His hands lay flat on the tabletop, utterly inert, fingers aligned. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked onto me. A prickle of profound discomfort made me shift, attempting to break the invisible tether of his stare, but it felt like a physical pressure against my skin. Agnes returned, the mug landing with a soft, deliberate clink. I attempted a reciprocal smile, but the gesture felt brittle, alien on my face. Everything here felt off-kilter, like navigating the landscape of a half-remembered fever dream where logic held no sway. "Where you headed, traveling so late?" she inquired, lingering, her presence a palpable weight beside the booth. "Just through," I mumbled, lifting the mug. The coffee was tepid, acrid. Still, I drank, anything to hasten my departure. She nodded, a slow, knowing gesture that implied access to some hidden context. Don't get many wanderers this deep in the night. My eyes flickered towards the window, a silent plea for her to withdraw. Beyond the glass, my car sat alone in the desolate lot. Past that, only darkness, absolute and unadorned. No structures, no comforting streetlights, just the road dissolving into black ink. The diner's silence seemed to condense, pressing inward. A slow scan of the room confirmed my rising dread. They were all looking now. Every single patron, their faces void of expression, but their collective gaze intensely focused solely on me. My attention snapped down to the murky coffee, my breath catching. Just tired, I told myself. Road fatigue playing tricks. But when I forced my head up again, the unblinking scrutiny remained. "Everything satisfactory, sugar?" Agnes's voice, sharp and sudden, made me flinch. She stood behind the counter again, hands planted firmly, her observation keen, too keen. "Fine," I answered, the word trembling slightly. "Just the check, please." Her smile remained fixed, unwavering, yet a subtle hardening occurred in her eyes. She made no move towards the register. "You certain you won't have a slice? The apple crumble is famed." "No, I'm good, really." I pushed myself up, reaching for my jacket, poised for flight. But turning towards the exit, my breath hitched. The door wasn't just closed, it was secured. A thick, greasy chain snaked through the handles, fastened by a heavy padlock I hadn't registered upon entering. My head swiveled back towards Agnes, my throat suddenly parched. "Why is the door locked?" She didn't respond immediately, maintaining that unnerving, placid smile. "Oh, that? Nothing to fret about. Just for your protection, dear. Never know what sort drifts along this highway after dark." A step backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. I need to leave now. Agnes tilted her head, the smile finally acquiring a chilling edge. But you haven't finished your coffee. My gaze darted wildly, searching for an alternative escape. The other customers remained statuesque, their eyes drilling into me like silent accusations. My hands trembled, but I fought to keep my voice level. "Unlock the door, please." Ignoring my plea, Agnes moved deliberately to the counter and lifted an old rotary phone receiver. Cradling it, she watched me. "Best let the traveler know you've arrived. He'll want to meet you." That was enough. No waiting, no further questions. I bolted towards the diner's rear, a desperate hope for another exit propelling me. Past the swinging kitchen doors, a wave of rancid grease and something indefinably old assaulted my senses. I plunged down a narrow, dim corridor. At its terminus, blessed relief, a door stenciled with a faded exit. Tears nearly sprang as I lunged for it, shoving the handle, only to find it solidly, immovably locked, just like the front. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I hammered against the unyielding wood, a futile gesture against the miles of surrounding emptiness. Spinning around, back pressed to the door, I gasped for air. And then I heard it. Footsteps, measured, unhurried, echoing down the confined space. One of the patrons, the man whose proximity had first unsettled me, advanced steadily, his face a mask, his eyes fixed unerringly on mine. "Agnes says you're to come back now," he stated, his voice utterly devoid of inflection, flat as packed earth. Scrabbling backward, my hands searched frantically for a weapon, finding only smooth, cold wall. Nothing. A dead end, sealed tight. With a surge of adrenaline, I dodged past him, sprinting back into the main dining area, seized by a wild notion of finding something, anything, heavy enough to smash the front lock. But Agnes stood waiting, sentinel-like by the entrance. Her smile was entirely gone now, replaced by a look of cold, hard purpose. "You won't be leaving," she said, her voice low and resonant. "Not until the traveler arrives. Might as well make yourself comfortable." The room tilted, vision tunneling. Acting on pure instinct, I seized the nearest vacant chair, hoisting it high and swinging with all my might against the large plate glass window. The shattering crash was cataclysmic in the silence. Ignoring the jagged edges tearing at my hands and clothes, I scrambled through the opening, landing hard on the gravel outside. Keys trembled in my sweat-slicked hand. I flung myself into the driver's seat, ignition catching, engine roaring alive. Tires screamed as I fishtailed out of the lot, refusing to glance in the rear-view mirror until the sickly violet glow of the lamplight spoon was utterly consumed by the indifferent, sprawling darkness. Dawn found me miles away, knuckles white on the steering wheel, muscles aching from tension. Who the traveler was, what purpose they held for solitary wanderers, remained unanswered questions festering in my mind. But now, whenever the road stretches long and night deepens, the memory surfaces. Those vacant stares, Agnes's smile blooming like a poisonous flower. Roadside diners, no matter how inviting their light, no matter how weary the driver, are sanctuaries I no longer seek. Never had I fathomed the night could render one so utterly bare. I sought this coast for its promise, evenings hushed save for the sea's sigh, air crisp with brine, a quietude to mend the city-frayed soul. Traffic's clamor, the relentless hum of anxiety, these I'd hoped to shed like an old skin, and initially tranquility reigned. Sleep came deep and dreamless. Dawn arrived without the familiar throb behind the eyes. Then whispers began, tendrils of local lore curling around a hidden inlet, a slash of beach paved in obsidian granules, sequestered behind a barricade of fractured stone. After midnight, they murmured, the place turned. Peculiar. Tales surfaced of aberrant acoustics, of geometries appearing spontaneously in the dark sand, of a tremor that pulsed up from the earth itself. Stay clear, the warnings came, soft but insistent. Yet prohibitions have always been invitations to my curiosity. A moonless night beckoned, and I answered. Only then did I grasp that the rumors were not mere hyperbole. Something resides there, something far worse than imagination had dared to paint. My rented dwelling, a compact single-bedroom structure, clings not far from the shoreline. Timber groans when the wind asserts itself, a familiar chorus in its simple architecture that I find strangely consoling. Through the living room pane, a sliver of ocean glints. My days often involve tracing the rugged perimeter leading toward that particular cove. The sand there, granular and profoundly dark, verges on black. Its texture, coarser than any strand I'd known, abrades the soles, clings tenaciously to boot leather if one walks unguarded. It struck me. The utter desertion of the place. Neighboring beaches hosted at least a scattering of souls by day. This cove remained perpetually untouched, untenanted. Tentatively, I probed the locals. Some offered shrugs, confessing an unease they couldn't articulate. Others recounted the persistent legend. During specific low tides, under the cloak of night, enigmatic forms materialized upon the sand. What forms? Their answers diverged. One man spoke of impressions resembling footprints, arrayed in patterns, his gaze skittering away from mine as he spoke. Another mentioned catching, on the wind near the shore, a profound, rhythmic breathing. An elder, his face a map of sea-weathered lines, simply cautioned vigilance after dusk. Initially, I filed these accounts alongside other small-town mythologies. Several nights, I paced the coastline, encountering nothing beyond the tide's ebb and flow, breathing the salt-laced air, returning home imbued with a fragile sense of calm. But a few nights passed, the atmosphere shifted, grew taut. The heavens were star-pricked but moonless, amplifying the darkness. A colder edge honed the wind, and a persistent tension knotted my neck and shoulders. This, I decided, was the night. Armed with a meager torch and clad in sturdy boots, I ventured out. The path toward the cove felt instantly unnerving. Wind hissed through the dry brush. Unseen branches snapped in the deeper shadows. My torch beam sliced a trembling, narrow wound through the absolute black. Stones shifted underfoot as I navigated past looming boulders. The waves crashed with unusual violence, a percussive roar against the silence. Ahead, the cove's silhouette emerged, the sand within appearing darker still, almost merging with the night sky above. With cautious footing, I descended a short embankment, the sand yielding beneath my weight, thick, gritty, palpable even through the soles of my boots. I extinguished the torch momentarily, allowing my vision to bleed into the ambient gloom. In that instant of manufactured blindness, a peculiar sound reached me, a soft, resonant thud, seemingly distant. Torchlight flared back to life, revealing nothing. A few paces forward confirmed the tide was low, the ocean withdrawn, leaving a wide, damp ribbon of sand near the water's lip. My gaze swept the expanse, searching. At first, only my own tracks marred the surface. Then, deeper impressions resolved themselves from the darkness, arranged in a crude semicircle. Drawing nearer, I played the torch beam across them. Footprints, yes, but nearly twice the depth of my own, pressed into a precise curve. Crouching, I traced the edge of one hollow with my fingertips. The sand within felt unnaturally frigid, starkly colder than the surrounding beach. Straightening, scanning the darkness, I realized the pattern continued, extending into a near-perfect circle further up the shore. A disquieting rhythm began in my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. Breath hitched, my palms grew slick. A strange, buzzing resonance filled my core. Stay calm, I chided myself. Examine this more closely. I followed the line of prints, walking parallel. Each indentation shared the same basic morphology, a defined heel, the suggestion of toes. Yet they were immense, driven deep into the sand as if stamped by colossal weight, repeatedly in the same spots. Then a new sound, a powerful, rasping inhalation, the cadence rapid, like some vast creature drawing breath. It seemed to emanate from behind me. I spun, torch beam slashing emptiness. The fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. I swept the light across the beach. Only the dark expanse, my own recent tracks trailing back, the circle of immense prints to my right. The breathing sounded again, unmistakably now from my left. I pivoted, a spike of pure fear lancing my spine. Nothing, only darkness and the faint, oily sheen of the distant sea. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet a perverse compulsion held me fast, a need to comprehend. I stepped towards the waterline, seeking the pattern's continuation. The tide had indeed receded far, the wet sand gleaming faintly under the starlight. As I approached, I witnessed it. More prints forming, not already present but appearing incrementally. Sand collapsing inward, compacting moment by moment, as if under the pressure of an invisible footfall. My chest constricted. I felt the frantic beat of my heart against my ribs. I fought to regulate my breathing, but it only quickened. My hands trembled, the torch beam quivering in my grasp. I backed away, convinced now the need to flee, but my legs felt leaden, hesitant. Then I saw the prints initiating a new configuration, another circle, this one contracting, closing around the space where I stood. I watched them materialize, lines connecting, forming a wider ring that tightened with each fresh impression. The architect remained unseen, yet the air grew thick, pressing down, a palpable pressure on my lungs akin to standing near some immense, unseen magnet. My stomach roiled. My own voice, thin and wavering, fractured the silence. "Who's there? Show yourself." The only reply was the breathing, closer now, seeming to circumambulate me. The sheer depth of the prints spoke of terrifying force. I turned to run, aiming for the slope, the rocks, the path back to the road. But the sea had surged inward with alarming speed. Water now submerged a significant portion of the sand I'd crossed minutes before. The wind intensified, slapping my face with cold spray, the taste of salt sharp on my tongue. My legs felt numb, yet I forced them onward, seeking a route around the encroaching water. Moving rapidly along the cove's edge, something seized my right ankle. Not a hand of flesh, but a definite pressure, cold, unyielding like an iron clamp. I stumbled, nearly fallen, wrenching my leg free with a desperate jerk. My heart felt poised to detonate. The distinct sensation lingered, something attempting to drag me back towards those deepening prints. Stifling panic, I pushed forward, splashing into water that climbed to my calves. The frigid shock was bracing, but I pressed on. Another tug, this time on my left leg, stronger, drawing a gasp from my tight throat. I swung the torch wildly, only my own limb half submerged. Yet the pull persisted, yanking me backward. My foot slid on the slick sand. I pitched forward, barely avoiding collapse into the surf. Heart pounding, lungs burning, I regained my footing, inching along the base of the rock wall. The water crept higher, the sodden sand treacherous beneath me. A backward glance revealed the prints now tracing a spiral, overlapping circles converging towards the beach's center. The breathing sound rose and fell in harsh bursts, the panting of some titanic beast still unseen. I reached the cove's far boundary, where the rocky incline began. Scrabbling upwards, my hands slipped on the wet stone. My chest tightened. Beneath my palms, the rock itself seemed to thrum with a low vibration. My throat was parchment dry. Attempts to swallow resulted in choked coughs. Torch clamped between my teeth. I used both hands, seeking purchase. Sweat slicked my palms, betraying my grip. Below, the tide surged, waves washing over the dark sand, erasing the prints. Yet the pulling sensation remained, invisible tethers reaching for me. I kicked backward at empty air, a futile gesture. Focus. Climb. The breathing sounds amplified, ricocheting off the rock faces, multiplying until it felt like a chorus of immense lungs working in terrible unison. My heart hammered, muscles screamed in protest. Upward, ever upward, until I found a narrow ledge, then a flatter surface near the crest. I collapsed onto my back, gasping, head spinny, clothes clinging damply with sweat and seawater. Looking down, I saw the tide had claimed most of the black sand. A few partial prints lingered near the edges, dissolving underwater. But the breathing hadn't ceased. It seemed to emanate from everywhere. The rocks, the water, the very air around me. A profound chill settled into my bones. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Pushing myself up, I continued along the rocky path, movement deliberate, torch aimed low to avoid disaster. Every few steps, a compelled glance over my shoulder revealed only the dark heave of the waves. My throat remained constricted, mouth arid. My mind screamed run, but the treacherous ground forbade it. A slip, a fall here. After what felt an eternity, the familiar contours of the path towards my house emerged from the gloom. The wind still bit, the darkness felt suffocating, but the earth beneath was blessedly level. My torch flickered ominously. A sharp rap restored its steady beam. I propelled myself forward until the silhouette of the small wooden gate guarding my front yard materialized. Its latch groaned under my hand. I stumbled through, slammed it shut, and sagged onto the porch chair. My entire frame trembled. Sweat plastered my hair to my forehead. My shirt was a cold, damp second skin. My fingers felt clumsy, stiff, barely able to fumble with my boot laces. I sat there long moments, staring back down the path I'd fled. The breathing sounds had faded, subsumed once more by the wind's whistle, the gentle rustle of unseen leaves. Immediate sanctuary, perhaps, but my heart refused its usual rhythm. I haven't returned to that cove. The ocean still murmurs its nightly secrets. The air still carries its chill, but something within me is irrevocably altered. Each recollection of those prints summons a phantom cold on my ankles, the geometry of dread etched in sand. I remember the pressure, the sense of being enveloped by an unseen immensity. I remember the rise in water, the insistent pull towards the depths. For now, distance is my only defense. I harbor no desire to learn what happens upon a second visit. That presence lingers, a palpable weight in the coastal air, and I have no intention of testing its patience again. The quiet struck first. Not mere quiet, but a profound hush, the kind that clamps down when the world holds its breath. No avian chatter, no susurrus of leaves, a vacuum where sound ought to be. Hours I'd trekked, the soles of my boots grinding desiccated foliage, but now even that small noise felt swallowed by the stillness. The forest waited. My phone remained a useless brick. Signal dead, GPS defunct an hour past. Only instinct, a fickle compass, guided me deeper into the woods. The sun bled westward, its descent dragging elongated shadows that clawed across the forest floor, skeletal fingers reaching. Turn back, reason whispered. Retrace your steps to the marked path. Yet, a knot of defiance, laced with a perilous curiosity I'd soon curse, propelled me onward. Then, through the dense tapestry of trees, a tremor of light. Hope, sharp and sudden, lanced through me. A ranger's outpost? A camper's fire? I plunged forward, branches snagging, undergrowth tearing, drawn towards the nascent glow. What awaited stopped my breath. Cradled within a sudden clearing lay a huddle of dilapidated structures, their windows emitting a warm, buttery luminescence. Wisps of smoke pirouetted from leaning chimneys, and the low thrum of voices drifted on the cooling air. Relief, potent and dizzying, washed over me. People, help. They could guide me back, offer sanctuary. I stepped boldly into the open space, lifting a hand in greeting. The reaction was instantaneous, chilling. Voices sliced off mid-murmur. Curtains twitched, framing faces that peered out, pale and indistinct. A door groaned open on protesting hinges. A man emerged onto a sagging porch, his face a relief map of weathered lines, brow furrowed in suspicion. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, aiming for neighborly, for harmless. Apologies for the intrusion. I seem to have lost the trail. Could you possibly direct me towards the main road? He offered no immediate reply. His eyes, shadowed and penetrating, undertook a slow inventory of my presence. When words finally came, they were rough-hewn, like stones dragged over gravel. No roads reach here, wanderer. This is still water. We don't often see outsiders." A coldness unrelated to the evening's descent prickled my skin. The way he uttered outsiders coated the word in something unclean. My mistake. I didn't realize this was private property. I managed, striving for composure. If you could just point me towards the nearest town, I'll trouble you no further. His frown carved deeper grooves into his face. Town's a long walk, dark's fallen fast, unwise to be in these woods after sundown. As if summoned, a distant ululation split the air, a sound raw and alien, raising the hairs on my nape. No wolf, no coyote I'd ever known made such a cry. The man appeared to weigh options behind his guarded gaze. "Suppose you best come in. Settle you come mornin'." A primal urge screamed, "Run!" Flee back into the swallowing dark. But logic, cold and unwelcome, asserted itself. Lost, darkening woods, unknown creatures. Accepting was survival. I gave a reluctant nod, following his stooped figure towards the largest of the ramshackle buildings. As we crossed the clearing, more figures materialized from doorways, their scrutiny a palpable weight. Gaunt faces, pallid in the twilight, watched with unnerving curiosity. Children, wide-eyed and silent, clung to adult legs, observing. Inside, oil lamps cast a hesitant, flickering light, making shadows dance on walls papered in faded, indeterminate florals. The furniture looked burdened by age, heirlooms worn smooth by generations. The air hung thick, heavy with wood smoke and another scent. Earthy, vaguely sweet, unidentifiable and unsettling. "Name's Silas," the man stated, gesturing towards a scarred wooden table. "My wife, Agnes." A slender woman, her long gray hair catching the lamplight, acknowledged me with a slight inclination of her head from her station by the hearth. Her gaze, however, remained fixed upon me as she methodically stirred a concoction in a large, soot-blackened pot suspended over the flames. "I'm Alara," I offered, manufacturing a smile. "Thank you for your kindness." Silas emitted a non-committal grunt. "You'll bide here tonight. Mornin', we'll see about setting you right." The urge to argue, to demand immediate passage, felt futile. I was stranded, dependent on their dubious charity. Agnes ladled a thick stew into a chipped earthenware bowl, placing it before me. The aroma, rich and gamey, provoked a sharp pang of hunger. I hadn't eaten since dawn. Tentatively, I sampled a spoonful. The flavor was intense, unfamiliar. What sort of meat is this?" The question sprang more from a need to puncture the oppressive silence than genuine interest. "Best leave be questions you don't hunger for the answers to," Silas replied, his tone cementing the topic's closure. As I ate, a profound sense of wrongness coalesced. The unwavering scrutiny of Silas and Agnes, the unnatural quiet outside the thin walls, that pervasive, peculiar odor, it all wove a tapestry of dread that made my skin tighten. Later, Agnes guided me to a small Spartan room upstairs. The mattress sagged beneath me. The blankets exuded a musty scent, yet exhaustion claimed me quickly. I lay down, fully clothed, surrendering to sleep. I woke abruptly, heart hammering, adrift in unfamiliar pitch black. Memory surged back, the hike, the disorientation, find in still water. A sound from below snagged my attention. Voices, hushed but urgent, seeping through the floorboards. I crept to the window, moving with infinite care, and peered down. Moonlight silvered the clearing, revealing a gathering. Figures cloaked in long, dark robes stood in a loose circle, their faces obscured by deep hoods. At the circle's heart stood Silas, arms uplifted, chanting in a guttural tongue that resonated with no language I knew. My pulse throbbed against my ribs as I witnessed the cryptic ceremony. What unholy place was this? Suddenly, one hooded head snapped up, its shadowed gaze locking directly onto my window. I recoiled, dropping below the sill, praying I hadn't been seen. I remained crouched, scarcely daring to breathe, time stretching into an eternity. When I finally risked another glance, the clearing stood empty under the indifferent moon. Sleep, now, was an impossibility. Every creak of the ancient house sent jolts through me. With the first fragile hint of dawn painting the window gray, my resolve solidified. Escape. I eased the bedroom door open, each protesting squeak of the hinges echoing like a gunshot in the pre-dawn stillness. The house lay silent. Down the stairs I crept, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I reached the front door, my hand trembling as it closed around the cool metal knob. "Leaving us so soon?" The voice, directly behind me, turned my blood to ice. Slowly, I pivoted. Silas stood at the stair's base, his eyes glinting in the gloom. I wanted an early start," I stammered, my fingers tightening on the handle. He took a deliberate step closer. Not mannerly, departing without farewells, especially after glimpsing things not meant for outside eyes. Fear, cold and absolute, flooded me. "I didn't see anything," I lied, my voice betraying me with a tremor. "Please, I just want to go home." He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "Afraid that's not feasible now. You understand, Stillwater has arrangements for those who pry into our ways." I didn't wait for elaboration. Wrenching the door open, I bolted, feet pounding the packed earth, sprinting for the sanctuary of the trees. Shouts erupted behind me, the unmistakable sounds of pursuit. Blindly, I ran, branches lashing my face, unseen roots conspiring to trip me. The bizarre, howling cry from the previous night echoed through the woods, closer now, imbued with a ravenous hunger that chilled me to the bone. How long I ran, I cannot say. My lungs burned, legs turned to leaden weights, but sheer terror fueled my flight. The sounds of pursuit eventually receded, yet I dared not slow my pace. An invisible tether seemed to connect me to something back there, something that didn't need to run to capture its quarry. Just as my strength utterly failed, I burst from the tree line onto the blessed solid surface of a paved road. Headlights approached. I waved my arms, frantic, heedless of my wild appearance. The car braked sharply, revealing an elderly couple peering out with alarmed concern. "Good heavens, are you all right, dear?" the woman asked, her eyes wide at my disheveled state. I cast a panicked glance back towards the forest's edge. No figures emerged, yet I felt unseen eyes watching from the deep shadows between the trunks. "Please," I gasped, breath tearing at my throat. "I need help. A ride, nearest town." After a heartbeat's hesitation, they nodded. I scrambled into the back seat, collapsing against the upholstery. As the car pulled away, my gaze remained fixed on the receding wall of trees, half expectant to see the cloaked figures step out into the light. But only trees remained, guarding the secrets held within. I never filed a report. The story felt too thin, too mad for belief. Yet sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, that unearthly howl echoes in my dreams. I wake sweating, clutching at the familiar reality of city sounds beyond my window. But I know, out there, nestled deep where maps show only wilderness, still water remains. And I offer silent prayers that no other lost soul ever stumbles upon its shadowed threshold. My initial glimpse of the Thorns engaged in their nocturnal backyard theatrics struck me merely as peculiar suburban eccentricity. Weeks unfurled, however, their clandestine activities deepening into disquietude, planting a seed of suspicion. The unassuming house, flanking mine, nestled in its quietude, might well be a vessel for secrets both tenebrous and perilous. Little did I fathom how my burgeoning curiosity would propel me down corridors challenging the very bedrock of my sanity, fracturing my perception of the tangible world. They call me Ilara. 34 years orbiting the sun, a weaver of words by trade, I'd sought refuge in this hushed enclave 6 months prior, hoping its tranquility would cradle the novel gestating within me. The street initially presented a facade of perfection. Lawns meticulously shorn, smiles readily offered, a communal warmth absent from my former city existence. This idyll fractured the day the Thorns took possession of the neighboring property. From the outset, an unsettling dissonance clung to the family. Silas and Morwen Thorn offered politesse when I presented a welcoming token, yet their smiles were glacial, never quite igniting their eyes. Their progeny, twins scarcely 10 winters old, possessed an unnerving stillness, their gazes locking onto mine with disquieting, unwavering focus. It began subtly. Susurrations carried on the midnight air, whispers that seemed to coil around the eaves, cryptic sigils etched onto their garage door, spectral apparitions vanished by dawn, deliveries of substantial, strangely contoured crates exuding a faint, cloying perfume, sickly sweet and suggestive. I attempted to weave rationalizations. Perhaps they were adherents of some esoteric philosophy, practitioners of an unconventional craft. Then arrived the night of the first lunar zenith after their arrival, shattering my attempts at placation. Engrossed in a particularly serpentine chapter, Sleep a Distant Shore, I registered it. A low, resonant vibration thrumming through the very studs of my house, a guttural chant that resonated deep within my bones. Drawn by an irresistible, dreadful curiosity, I stole towards my bedroom window, its pane overlooking their shadowed domain. The tableau that unfolded froze the marrow in my bones. The entire Thorn contingent, draped in umbral robes, congregated around a crude monolith of stone. Silas recited from a tome bound in what looked disturbingly like aged parchment or skin, his voice undulating through cadences of an unknown, guttural tongue. Morwen, poised beside him, held aloft a crescent blade that drank the moonlight, its edge unnaturally keen. And there, lashed upon the stone slab, lay a creature. Caprine, perhaps, yet distorted, its proportions an affront to natural law. As I watched, paralyzed by revulsion, Morwen elevated the blade. The incantations crested, a wave of sonic dissonance, and then I recoiled, eyes squeezed shut, yet the piercing, agonized cry, abruptly choked into a wet finality, echoed relentlessly in the chambers of my skull. The remainder of the night was a huddled vigil in my bed, a desperate mantra repeating, "A nightmare, only a nightmare." But morning light revealed Silas methodically hosing a viscous, dark stain from their patio flagstones. The reality was inescapable, brutal. Henceforth, unraveling the Thorn's enigma became my fixation. My existence narrowed to observation, a meticulous chronicle of their ingress and egress, each aberrant incident logged. The lunar rites persisted, each iteration seemingly more intricate, escalating towards some veiled culmination. Tentative inquiries directed at other neighbors yielded nothing but vacant stares or platitudes. Mrs. Albright across the way even lauded the Thorns as charming garden soirees. It felt as though I inhabited a separate reality, the sole witness to the encroaching darkness next door. One sun-drenched afternoon, seizing an opportunity during their absence, I mustered the audacity to peer through the grimy pane of their garage window. The sight within threatened to wrench a scream from my lungs. Walls crawled with labyrinthine symbols, glyphs interwoven with unsettling anatomical charts. Shelves groaned under the weight of jars containing specimens I instinctively refused to comprehend, suspended in murky fluid. Dominating the space, a massive, intricately carved chest, secured by heavy, archaic padlocks. The impulse to alert the authorities warred with the certainty of disbelief. Accusations of cult activity, whispers of animal sacrifice. Without tangible proof, I would be dismissed as unhinged. Thus, the decision crystallized. Evidence was paramount. A sophisticated camera, equipped with a formidable zoom lens, became my instrument. I documented everything: clandestine nocturnal deliveries, cloaked figures arriving under bruised twilight skies, the rituals intensifying as an unseen deadline loomed. It was amidst one such clandestine nocturnal vigil, lens trained on their escalating rites, that the floor fell out from under my perceived safety. Preoccupied, utterly absorbed, I failed to register the stealthy breach of my own back door. Awareness dawned only with a rough hand clamped firmly across my mouth, silencing the nascent shriek. "Tuck, tuck, Ilara," Silas Thorne's voice, a silken menace, breathed against my ear. Curiosity, you know, a fatal flaw in felines and intrusive neighbors. Dragged unceremoniously from my sanctuary, thrust into the Thorns' backyard miasma, a palpable field of wrongness. Morwen and the twins awaited, their expressions glacial masks as I thrashed against Silas's unyielding grip. They forced me onto the altar. The stone, frigid and stained with the residue of prior desecrations, met my back. "We entertained such possibilities for you, Ilara," Morwen murmured, her tone unnervingly placid, devoid of human warmth. "A willing acolyte. But your prying nature proved insurmountable, didn't it? You simply couldn't avert your gaze. As their dissonant chanting commenced, a peculiar, leaden lethargy invaded my being. My limbs turned traitor, refusing commands. Thoughts grew viscous, slow. Through a deepening fog, I perceived Morwen raising the sickle blade, now pulsing with an eerie internal luminescence. Yet, poised at the precipice of oblivion, the night detonated in a blinding actinic flash. A peal like fractured heavens rolled across the manicured lawns. Abruptly, the yard teemed with figures clad in incandescent plate, brandishing swords that spat raw, coruscating energy. The thorns scattered, emitting sounds of reptilian fury and primal terror. The newcomers pursued with relentless grace, all save one, who knelt beside me, a warm palm settling on my brow. "Peace," resonated a voice like chiming crystal, impossibly pure. "The peril has passed." As sensation returned, clarity flooding my mind, I gazed up at a being whose sheer beauty and radiance were almost painful to behold, an emanation of light given form. They helped me sit upright. The backyard, moments before a stage for suburban horror, was now a chaotic battleground. The thorns fought with feral desperation, their bodies warping, twisting in defiance of physical law and Euclidean geometry. What is this?" I rasped, my throat raw. The entity beside me. Angel? Deity? My lexicon offered no suitable term, spoke with gentle gravity. "Those you perceived as the thorns belong to realms beyond your ken. Primordial entities thriving on dissonance and dread. Our hunt has spanned dimensions, Alara." As I watched, transfixed, Silas Thorne uttered an unearthly shriek as one of the luminous warriors pierced him with a blade forged of pure light. His form imploded, collapsing into a point of absolute absence before winking out entirely, leaving not even ash. The conflict concluded swiftly thereafter. Morwen and one twin suffered identical dissolution, while the remaining progeny was subdued, bound in chains of shimmering force that elicited tormented writhes. The being who had shielded me helped me rise to unsteady feet. "You have shown remarkable fortitude, Alara, but your journey through this shadow is not yet concluded. You have witnessed truths inimical to mortal sanity, glimpsed the gears beneath reality's fragile veneer." My stomach plummeted. What happens now? Will you erase me? A laugh, like the ringing of tiny silver bells, echoed softly. "No, nothing so crude. But the integrity of your world and ours requires safeguarding. We can excise these memories, return you to your former existence, untouched by this revelation. Allow you to finish your novel in blissful ignorance, or... The word hung in the air, pregnant with terror and an unexpected, exhilarating allure. Or you can embrace this truth. Stand with us. Join the eternal vigil against the encroaching shadows that threaten not merely this fragile sphere, but all realities woven into the cosmic loom. The path is arduous, demanding, yet it offers purpose and wonder far exceeding mortal comprehension." My mind spun, a vortex of impossibility and choice. The lure of blissful ignorance, of reclaiming my quiet, predictable life, warred with the undeniable, shattering reality of what I'd seen. Looking at these incandescent guardians, at the cosmic tapestry torn open before me, I understood. Ignorance was no longer an option. The veil, once lifted, could not be unseen. "I accept," I declared, my voice steadier than my pulse. "I want to help." A smile bloomed on the being's face, a sight of such profound beauty it elicited involuntary tears. "Welcome, then, Ilara, to the Sentinels of the Veil. Your initiation commences." As a shimmering aperture, a tear in the fabric of the night, dilated in the air before us, I cast a final glance at the house, the street, the life receding into mundane memory like a half-forgotten dream. Then, drawing a breath laden with ozone and the faint scent of distant stars, I stepped through the threshold into the unknown, poised for the marvels and monstrosities that lay beyond. Now, patrolling the liminal spaces between dimensions, that former life feels spectral, distant, yet regret finds no purchase here. For I comprehend the truth now. Beneath the placid surface of the ordinary, an endless war unfolds between illumination and oblivion. And I stand, a willing sentinel on the precipice, defending not just a quiet suburban street, but the fragile architecture of existence itself from the horrors that fester in the shadowed folds between worlds.